History channel and to our live stream Q&A, Ask Me Anything, for Friday, March 27th, the first of our weekend live streams, part one of three. The first Q&A, the next one will be tomorrow at 3 p.m. Eastern, and then we have our live stream lecture, which you can vote on exclusively here on YouTube with the Friendly Neighborhood History channel for 4 p.m. Eastern on Sundays, on this Sunday. So we've got, or actually, it's going to be 5 p.m. It's delayed an hour this weekend. So um, get all of your history questions about social studies and the like answered. We're starting a few minutes early. Usually we start about 6 o'clock. It's about 5:51 or so. So we are starting a little bit early today. Might go a little bit over. We'll see exactly how everything goes, how the discussion goes. If you like history and social studies, you are in the right place. Consider liking and subscribing and becoming a friendly neighborhood historian. It's as easy as all that. Of course, there's also official friendly neighborhood historians who are members who have particular bonuses and perks, which you can definitely get, which we would love if you did, but no pressure whatsoever. Um, you want me to go in depth on a topic or discuss a topic from a historical perspective that is not necessarily historical, maybe something religious or geopolitical or political? Consider giving a super chat. Every donation you make goes back into the channel to make things as good as possible for all of you. So hopefully you can hear me and see me all right. Hopefully the feed is good and the microphone is good. It's great to have you here in the Friendly Neighborhood History Studio. I'm picking a nice, appropriate historical background, and we'll go from there. Let's see here. Hopefully you can all hear me okay, like I said. And what perfect imagery here. The she-wolf. This is the mother who supposedly suckled the young of Romulus and Remus, and the founders of Rome were supposedly raised by this she-wolf before they founded the city in 753, and Romulus killed Remus. So, yep, this is the Friendly Neighborhood History channel. Welcome to our Q&A about history and social studies. You know what? I'm going to pick a different background because that's just too light to see the numbers at the top of the screen for me. Okay, so ancient Rome, you've got that. That would be a fun background to do. We talk about all types of history here, so ask about any type of history from any area and any part of the world, and chances are we have a pretty good answer for you. Um, let me see. Okay, this one's good. This one, oh, that one's gonna be hard to see, but that's the bed of Abraham Lincoln when he died. You see Salmon P. Chase standing above him. Probably not gonna be able to use that one just because. All right, this one's good. This is the Freedmen's Bureau. This was an African American or an organization created for African Americans to help them get economic, educational, social, and political opportunities following the end of the Civil War. And if you're wondering why so yeah, um, and yes, you are in at the start. So it is 5:53 on the East Coast of the US, and this is the Friendly Neighborhood History channel. Please like and subscribe for all sorts of friendly neighborhood history content. Drop a comment, topic, or question into the chat, and we'd be happy to discuss it all with you. So happy to have you here. Hope your weekend is going well. Um, and yeah, I'm going to take a sip of water. I'm not sponsored by Crystal Geyser, but I would love to be. And water is quite delicious. Most things about ancient Roman myths and legend and religion is incredibly weird. Yes, Romulus and Remus being abandoned as orphans, being suckled by a she-wolf, and then Romulus killing Remus in order to found the city of Rome is a pretty weird story. But if you want to know the entire story of early Rome, including Romulus and Remus and the first 7 Roman kings, go and watch my video about the Roman kingdom. It's one of my favorite videos that I ever made. So yes, and we are sponsored indeed by H2O, as is all living organisms. So, mm, uh, so other questions about history or social studies, please drop them in the chat. We'll be happy to discuss them with you. 32626, news history, NBC and ABC, Iranian news. Iran destroyed 17 U.S. military bases. Trump postponed energy facilities threats another 10 days. Okay. Don't know what that is. But all right, questions about history and social studies is what we are talking about today at the Friendly Neighborhood History channel. So again, please like and subscribe if you want to learn more about history and social sciences. We'd be happy to talk more to you about that. Did you know that scientifically, factually, objectively, Britain is the center of the world, specifically the town of the Greenwich, London? Yes. Greenwich tells time. That's why. Okay. Yep, I needed that. I was very thirsty and it's very hot today. Um, yes, I know that. Greenwich is the center of time in London, or for England and for London, and so All right, other questions about history, social studies. We'll be going for about an hour answering all of them. How is Japanese fascism different? Japanese fascism was much more about getting a seat at the table with European imperialism. If anything, Imperial Japan should be referred to as just that. They were an imperialist society, much more interested in building an empire similar to the ones the British, the French, and the Germans had had in the 19th and early 20th century, and doing that in Asia. That's what the Second Sino-Japanese War, which I believe is the start of the last World War, is about. It's about Japan claiming more lands from China and building an empire and sphere of influence in Eastern Asia. So the Japanese were much more interested in territorial acquisitions to build an empire. In a way, they were fascist in that they were extraordinarily nationalist, but at the same time, their fascism also mixed very well with their sense uh, of national identity, but also building an empire. They had imperial aspirations everywhere they went. And so, from a sense of being militaristic, aggressive, and acquisitive, they were very much a fascist society. But they were different because they were focusing on building an empire and getting a seat at the table for European power, something they had felt they had been shunned from for the last century, ever since the Meiji Restoration and Commodore Matthew Perry and all of that. Do you know why they come up with the idea of a central time? Because of Greenwich, we get it. What's up with Okinawa and the natives there? Kind of their own independent island that obviously has been heavily influenced by the Japanese. The people of Okinawa considered themselves to be different than the Japanese, although it is one of the key battles of the last World War. By the way, when I say World War, I mean World War III. You probably know it as World War II, but I believe the Seven Years' War is the proper First World War, making the two world wars the in the 20th century, World War II and World War III, respectively. Thank you, Justin. I do love this tie. A nice green and yellow match. What do you know about why they did the suicide thing? The Japanese would unalive themselves through the practice of harikari or seppuku. This was part of keeping honor with the Bushido code, an ancient and um, medieval concept for the Japanese samurai, the elite fighting warriors, which basically said that it was more noble to sacrifice oneself than to be killed by your enemies or to be captured and be tortured and give up secrets. So that's why you had kamikazes crashing their planes into carriers rather than being taken alive. Necessarily, if God exists necessarily. Possibly, God doesn't exist, therefore, God doesn't exist. Welcome to atheism. Glad to have you. This is the friendly neighborhood history. This is a Wendy's, sir. We're not talking about philosophy and the existence of God or not. I'm answering questions about history or social studies. If you want me to discuss something philosophical and historical at the same time, give a super chat mushroom. No, the main reason was the British train network couldn't function properly without a central time. Because each town and city had their own time, and that was based off of the sun, was according to them, so each town was like 1 minute behind or in front of the other. I see. Interesting, Harry. Thank you for sharing that. Harry is our moderator, one of our great moderators, and a local resident on British history. How gross were ancient Roman communal toilets? The Romans were actually pretty sanitary by ancient standards, especially when you consider the bathing system, the forum, the fact that, and the running waters of the aqueducts. The Romans were pretty well developed in their infrastructure. One of the huge signs of the break and collapse of the Roman Empire is the breakdown of their infrastructure. Hmm. Wittgenstein was Bertrand Russell's student. Any comments? Don't know enough about it. Sorry, just don't know enough about that to comment on it. I know who Bertrand Russell is, and I know Wittgenstein by reputation, but yeah. Where did you go to school? I don't know. I don't share my personal information. I have a bachelor's and a master's in history. Should the USA have dropped the first atomic bomb on Japan on an uninhabited or sparsely populated area? Um, that probably would not have shocked the Japanese as much as losing a city. The warnings by the US did imply that they wanted the Japanese to abandon as much as they possibly could the area around Hiroshima before they dropped the bomb. They did the same thing at Nagasaki, by the way. So the Japanese didn't expect anything. So obviously, the heavier handed approach ended up winning, but barely. The Japanese were still willing to fight after the first bomb, and some of them were still willing to go even after the second bomb. It only took a statement from their emperor, who they considered to be divine, their a kami, a spirit, an incarnate spirit, to actually say, "Hands off, stop fighting." Why do we have daylight savings time? Because of Woodrow Wilson, who is the most hated president in all of internet history and certainly on this channel. Woodrow Wilson basically creates daylight savings time as a way to get more manufacturing hours, more factory production during the Great War. The US joins it in 1917, and daylight savings laws are passed in 1918 that create spring forward. And then, of course, you have to fall back which allows for an extra hour of productivity and sunlight and daytime activity for workers during the midst of a war. Doctorate will be incoming. Hopefully, you guys will help me pay for it. The Nazis invented Fanta. Well, now I don't want to drink it anymore. What's a crazy history fact that you know? Um, I know a lot of crazy history facts. You should watch my all my videos, my shorts, and long form videos I have on this channel, but I have a lot of shorts videos on crazy history or hot takes in history. Um, One off the top of my head. Lincoln did not want to free the slaves. Speaking of the Freedmen's Bureau and everything back here, Lincoln wanted to send them back to Africa. Hello, Anthony. Good to see you. Australia lost a war to birds. Yes, the Emu War of 1932. Um, when and legal to smell poo poo. I don't know. When you don't wipe. Um, so let's see. Harry, take care of the trolls, please. Were ancient Roman orgies real? Probably a little bit exaggerated and not as common as you would think, but definitely there was a lot of that going on. Okay. The Egyptians used animal livers as a form of a prophylactic. That's interesting. Rodolfo's here, my other moderator. Good. So we got our moderators. We got some people in the chat. Looks like new people and old people. No, Lincoln did not have slaves. Lincoln was one of the few U.S. presidents who did not have slaves. The Adamses and Lincoln were the only presidents not to have slaves until Ulysses S. Grant. I know a little bit about the history of Argentina, not a huge amount. Jose de San Martin is the general who did in the southern part of South America what Simon Bolivar did in the northern part of South America and helping them gain their freedom and liberty from the Spanish. After the defeat of Napoleon, who I have a lot of information and videos on, the Spanish tried to, and his brother, who had ruled over Spain, the end of the Peninsular War allowed Spain to assert its control over its colonies in Latin America. However, many of them were already starting to rebel, and the Spanish eventually decided by the early 1820s to let most of them go. And this is how Argentina gained its independence, I think, in 1822. Hello, Hearts. Good to see you. And we've got our other moderator who will put in the social media handles as well as a link to his own excellent channel where he does shorts of the U.S. history. Please check out Harsonet and his channel. It's really, really good. Thomas Jefferson famously slept with his female slaves, yes, including Sally Hemings. In fact, he had children with some of his slaves and did not let them go anyways. Jesus never owned slaves. He's a man of peace. Repent to him and run towards his love. Okay, then. Um, Fun, crazy fact: the Democrats started the KKK. Everybody knows that. Everybody in this channel who's a friendly neighborhood historian knows that. That doesn't mean the Democrats of then are the Democrats of today. That is a completely right-wing political talking point just thrown in as a barn burner. Don't do that. Who built Stonehenge? Probably the Druids. Have you ever listened to Vidal? No. Historically, was Jesus just a zealot? Okay, so that's a great question. Zealot in the sense of being religiously fanatical and committed to a religious dogma. Yes, Jesus was very zealous. Obviously, he was zealous to his own self, believing he was the fulfillment of Jewish prophecy and he was the Jewish Messiah. At the same time, however, Jesus of Nazareth was not a zealot with a capital Z. There was a group of radical revolutionaries in Judea at the time who wanted to overthrow Roman rule, known as the Zealots. In fact, one of his disciples was a zealot. Um, so the Zealots were believed in that the Messiah should be a conqueror who overthrows the Romans. Jesus doesn't do that. He dies on the cross, and supposedly, and his disciples' teachings don't show anything related to a zealot. His resurrection, and then the spiritual side of Christianity, the ascent of the Holy Spirit, and the ideas of peace and love that Christianity is supposed to spread. I mean, that's not zealot. That's not first century Judaic zealotry. And yes, those social medias you can follow on. Can you tell me about the Scottsboro case in 1931? Nope, don't know about it. Stonehenge was a pagan and ancient monument made by our druids, but here's the one in Ireland that's cooler and annoyingly, I forget its name. Yeah, there's stone circles all over Ireland that honor the druids and ancient fairies and mythical creatures. Listen to Biden talk in his 80s and 90s. It's not that long ago. It still is still up to today. Biden is not president anymore. I don't care about Joe Biden. If you want me to give my historical take on a political issue, namely President Biden and his presidency that's been gone for more than a year for some reason, give a super chat. It's a circular monument that gets lightened on the solstices. That's pretty cool. Know anything about Battle of Plassey in India? Isn't this where the British under Robert Cecil defeated a much larger Mughal force? It was one of the turning points in the 7 Years' War when the British and their Rajas were fighting the French and their Rajas. Good afternoon. Do you think the replication crisis has been solved or is otherwise over? I don't know what crisis there is, but I don't know. Thank you, Hussein. I really appreciate that. Welcome to the Friendly Neighborhood History Channel. Do you absolutely clean up at the pub quiz every time? I'm not an expert in everything. I know a lot about history and social studies, but there's a lot I'm still learning about, like, things like science. So no, I don't, but I could help. How did the Maoists and you could push my channel to all your friends at the pub so we can scratch each other's backs. How did the Maoists win the Chinese Civil War when the government troops had better equipment at the start? The peasantry eventually turned against the more oppressive Kuomintang, and basically Mao became a war hero by fighting against the Japanese. And the Americans were perfectly willing to step back and watch them fight in the Civil War, which eventually led to the communists winning. Yes, thank you, Noah. It's great to have you here. Thank you for subbing. I try to be as smart as I can. I think a lot of conscripts on the Chinese side false. Yeah, but there was also Mao gained the heart and sympathy of a Chinese peasantry. He reinterpreted communist Marxist Leninism in terms of the peasantry and social classes rather than just industrialized versus non-industrialized societies. And because of this, he seemed to be a much more sympathetic option to the peasantry of China than the Kuomintang did. No, I don't know the Scottsboro case. Hello, Tamara. Good to see you. But Jesus did proclaim himself as a Messiah and went against the Roman Pontifex Maximum. Yeah, Jesus also said his kingdom wasn't of this world. Jesus was obviously far more interested in spiritual ideas. Jesus was basically, from a religious standpoint of Second Temple Judaism, Jesus belonged to the school of the Pharisees. He clearly believed in the resurrection, calling himself a resurrection at one point. And he also taught a highly ethical state of affairs, nonviolence. I wouldn't say pacifism necessarily, but Jesus definitely seemed to be of a mindset of a strong ethical foundations of Judaism, which would be more of the class of the Pharisees. And you could argue that Christianity is just an offshoot of Judaism that was fighting groups of Pharisees fighting with themselves, and one of those Pharisee leaders just happened to get himself killed because he believed he was God, and that's where you get Christianity from. Um, Thank you, Jeff. I really appreciate that. Is the story of black men purposefully not being treated for sexually transmitted infections really true? A group of men who were observed but not treated. Yes, they were observed, never treated. It was the Tuskegee experiment. It's one of the U.S. government's dark skeletons in their closet. Obviously, the fact that it happened against African Americans is another chapter in the long list of history of abuses by the U.S. government against black people. The Romans did not have a problem with Jesus claiming to be God. The Romans' problems with Christianity was that it refused to recognize Rome as the embodiment of the religion. It also refused to acknowledge Caesar as God. Christianity, it was fine. The Romans didn't have problems with new gods. They added gods to their pantheon of gods all the time. The issue was Jesus of Nazareth being God. Did you ever read my view of James K. Polk on the Discord? No. But everyone can join the Discord and read all of the interesting thoughts and ideas that me and the other friendly neighborhood historians have. The Discord link should be in the chat. So please join us there. Um, Second Temple Judaism still believed in a physical kingdom. Pharisaical Judaism, Jesus had a spiritualized interpretation of that. Pharisaical Judaism was much more considered with ethical living, so Jesus was not a zealot, is what I'm saying. Have you ever read any of Adam Smith's works? How did it influence free markets in the United States? Haven't read them directly, but I know enough about Smith's philosophy, basically believing in just moral punishments, kind of a Judeo-Christian ethic that obviously was extremely influential at that time, especially on the founding fathers. Smith also taught, of course, the idea that the invisible hand of the market will adjust issues within the market, and the market can take care of itself without outside intervention. And this is obviously the basis for laissez-faire capitalism, which is hugely influential in the development of the U.S. economies, particularly in the 19th century. So you agree to look at my view on James K. Polk, and you just didn't and lied. No, I didn't lie. I haven't done it yet. That's not a lie. How can I become articulate and eloquent? I don't know. I really don't know. I just really love this stuff and I love talking about it. So maybe that's what it is. Find what your passion is, and then you can just go rant on about it for hours at a time. You look weird. What tribe are you from? The American one. That's probably why I look as weird as I do. Yeah, it was called the Tuskegee experiment, named after the famed uh, institute where African Americans were educated, the historic HBCU, the historically black college and university, founded by Booker T. Washington. But now vapidity, I don't know what that is. Are you accusing me of that? You don't look weird, bro. You look like a normal debate club dork. Yes, that probably is me. I got 5 subscribers for my founding fathers edit. Odd. Yes, people should go and subscribe to Harsinet's channel. I've been encouraging you to do that. And what was it? 2 Byte Sports. Please follow 2 Byte Sports. Do you know that on history on your dates? Only if she's interested in it. I mean, my ex is the one who encouraged me to start this channel because she was tired of me talking about it with her and wanted me to make some money at doing it. And guess what? I have that money and I don't have her anymore to spend it on, so I won. Yes, 2 Byte Sports. That's a YouTube channel you should all check out. He's got some really good stuff. Um, So how am I banal and vain and vapid? That's interesting. Um, why exactly is she your ex? I don't know. Give me a super chat. Maybe I'll tell you the story. It is. It's an extremely sweet story, Anthony. All right. Other questions about history or social studies? Thank you for choosing to start your weekend with us here at the Friendly Neighborhood History Channel, where we do history in a friendly, neighborly manner. We are on our way to 12,000 subscribers. We're hoping to get to 20,000 by the end of the year, and you can help us with that. If we get to 20,000 subscribers, I will do a reveal all. You get to know who I am, where I exactly am from, um, what profession I do, where I studied, all sorts of different, and you can finally pick my brain about all the different opinions I have on the various topics where I share my historical perspective without necessarily giving my opinion. So was Nixon right about the media's control on government? Probably right about the influence on it. And somebody said the internet is terrible. Can you guys hear and see me clearly? Am I coming in clearly? How much of the Russians how much of the Russian sleep experiment was true? I don't know. Some of it. So, good. Bring back the gap. Oh yeah, I have my trays in right now. I fixed most of the gap. So I don't know what Jason's talking about with terrible internet. Maybe he's the one with terrible internet. Thoughts on the US-Iran war? I'm not gonna share too much about it. It's obviously a mess. Go read my Substack article that talks about 1953 and the overthrowing of Mohammad Mossadegh, and 1979 and the overthrowing of the Shah, and why the US intervened at the wrong spot, did not intervene at the wrong spot, and is now maybe intervening at the wrong spot again. So, yeah. I don't wanna talk why was he shouldn't have been timed out for that. He had a serious question. He just didn't know, but he needed to give a super chat. If you want me to go in detail about that, please give a super chat to the channel. Uh, Other questions about history and social studies, please drop them on the chat. And we've got long form and short form content available for you at all times. I've been listening to a history of Iran. They've never had a good time of it. Persia was quite a massive and impressive empire because of Jimmy Carter. Well, yeah, I would say that Jimmy Carter really did not know what he was doing when it came to foreign policy, especially when it came to that, and also pulling out of the Olympics so that the Soviets could win all the gold medals because you wanted to pout. I don't know. What's your thoughts on the 1889 invasion of Medibo Paphos, where that land of Iodo Patrat was stolen? I have no idea what you're talking about, Andy. I don't know where that is. I think you're a troll. Persian Empire sounded great, very inclusive. Parthians, the Medo-Persians, aka the Achaemenids, the Sassanids. There have been many great Persian empires. The Safavids, the Qajir. The Shah, the system of the Shah, is a relatively new system. The Shah that was overthrown in 1979, his father had actually started it with the blessing of the British, basically turning Iran into a kingdom slash basically a dictatorship in the 1920s. But the title Shah is thousands of years old and refers to the supreme ruler of the Persian people. Um, do you know the history of Mesopotamian Chaldeans and Assyrians? Yeah, I do. Yeah, earliest, probably one of the earliest, if not the earliest civilization, known for their cuneiform tablets, hieroglyphic-like languages and scripts. Built many different chains of city-states. Rulers like Sargon of Akkad eventually build the Paleo-Babylonian Empire. There's two different Assyrian empires. They're pretty powerful. The Assyrians were quite brutal and known for their brutality. They invented crucifixion and were known for putting hooks in people's mouths and carrying them away, especially when they enslaved them after destroying their cities. Um, no kings tomorrow. Shut down these streets. I've heard there's another no kings protest. How many no kings protests does there need to be? I just have to say this. There was already a no kings protest. It's called July 4th. I mean, there's a no kings day in America. It's called July 4th. Um, What would be hilarious is if the British, in their sympathy towards hating this administration, were to participate in No King's Day. Was JFK assassination done by the CIA? Probably. What are your thoughts on Russia being banned from the 2026 Olympics, but Russian individuals being allowed? Makes no sense. They're going to represent their country. What else are they going to represent? Um, I wonder if my old friend Cherish is here. She showed me this channel, and I miss that woman. She's a good egg. Cherish. We've had Cherish on this channel, but I'm glad you're here, Music Journey. Um, thank you for staying and listening. What do you think of the phrase "winners write the history"? It's ridiculous. I mean, there's some truth to it, but it's extraordinarily cynical. It's just a way for people to dismiss and ignore the lessons that history has for you. And many of the lessons history has for you are not just don't do this or do this. Many of the lessons are about how the human condition actually works. History is chock full of stories about the human condition and what makes us what we are. And I think if we really want to know who we are as people, we should really learn and study history. Um, the victors write history, but you wouldn't know that, but that's a historical fact claim. It's a truth claim that the victors write history, but it's also a historical truth claim. So you have to prove that it's the victors who write the history. I mean, sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. There's history from below, there's history from the margins. There nowadays archaeology, ancient records, carbon dating. We have all the scientific, archaeological, and anthropological apparatuses that will help us prove or disprove whether the history that the victors wrote is actually true or not. And even if the victors do write history, what does that prove? Does it prove that they're all wrong? I mean, yes, everyone wants to make their own side look good, but that's everybody. It's very hard to write objective things without being boring and dry like a high school textbook. What agreement was made with Russia at the end of World War II regarding the Ukraine region? It's World War III, actually, but basically the idea was that the Russians there was no agreement made. Maybe at the end of the Cold War, there's an agreement that basically would allow Ukraine to be, independent. It broke apart, and it wasn't supposed to become part of NATO. NATO wasn't supposed to expand, but NATO is not what it was in the Cold War. NATO is a mutual defense pact, and it's not about stopping the Russians anymore because the Cold War is over. Um, yeah, I so uh so regarding with the Ukraine region, there was no real agreement made then. It was already part of the Soviet Union. Nikita Khrushchev came from the Ukraine. Anyways, let me see. Other questions. Thank you for staying and listening. Jimmy Carter was the best president America ever had. He didn't give a crap about foreign countries. He minded American business. Are you smoking something or just a troll? Jimmy Carter uh, Jimmy Carter intervened when he wasn't even president to try to stop North Korea and the United States from going to war in 1995. He infuriated the Clinton White House when he did this because he'd been out of office for 15 years. He had left in disgrace. Carter also negotiated the 1978 Camp David Accords between Israel and Egypt. Probably the only good thing Carter did when it came to foreign policy. Carter gave away the Panama Canal. Carter refused to intervene to uphold the Shah, who was a U.S. ally. Carter was extremely involved in foreign policy. Are you kidding me? And I don't want a long diatribe right now about what a great human being Jimmy Carter was. I know Jimmy Carter is a great human being. That doesn't make him a great president. Sorry. Would you ever be interested enough to research facts about Polk if I gave them to you? Sure. Nowadays, we have more ways to record, so we have plenty of external sources. Yeah, and we have a great way of synthesizing, preserving, reading, and translating ancient texts. What do you mean we need to give evidence for claims? That's called burden of proof. I think that the 7 Years' War is the First World War. The Second World War would be the Great War, and the Third World War would be the war with the Japanese and the Nazis. Hars, please put my video on the 7 Years' War in the chat. It would be bad for you because the GRE history subject test was discontinued in 2001. Test takers who focused heavily on memorizing historical facts, dates, and names often did well. Well, I would have aced that. So, if Patton joined the Germans and invaded Russia, what is your take? He wouldn't have joined the Germans, but he did want to invade Russia. So, probably a crazy hypothetical that comes out of nowhere. He had no love for the Germans. Would Africa have been better economically if France, UK stayed in power and never left? Tough to tell. They do there's industry educationalism, but the power vacuum, the lack of tribal recognition and sensitivities, and Britain and France's own political and social ambitions led to a hasty retreat from these areas, post-colonial dependencies like African countries owing huge amounts of debts to nations like France, and basically created the problems in Africa. The power vacuums created the problems in Africa that we have today. dictatorships, political instability, social unrest. That's all caused by the cloak and dagger thief in the night way that the European countries got out of there. Did Hitler copy Mussolini and make it worse? No. Mussolini was not, but it certainly was worse. Jimmy Carter, worst president ever. One of the worst, not the worst. Usually he goes in order of each comment. I try to. Does history repeat itself or does it rhyme? It rhymes. Um, let me see. Mind if I ask? Doesn't sound it, but his subjects for long form videos American centric? No. 7 Years War does include America, but that's European. I'm a European historian by trade, but I cover histories of all types. I've got a video on Japanese Christianity. I have a video on the history of Chinese imperial dynasties. I have one on the scramble for Africa. It's the first long form video I ever made. Um, I have short series on Russian history. I have series on Chinese Empire, the Chinese different Chinese empires, the Crusades. I generally am Western, but I have studied and talked about history of all sorts of areas of the world. I have a video on the Varna system in India, so I love looking at non-Western history. Thank you for asking, Anthony. Seems like you're new, and we're glad that you're here. Respectfully, Britain and France left America almost entirely more than 60 years ago. But Africa, yeah, this whole idea that all their problems are caused because of Europeans is bollocks. Yes, it's not fully the Africans' fault. It's not fully the Europeans' fault. Um, I will say that the educational, political, and social opportunities given by the British and the French to their colonized peoples actually allowed them to receive a proper understanding of Western principles that they used to demand their independence. Gandhi, um, Ho Chi Minh, Pol Pot, all of these people received Western education and invoked Western principles and ideas, not just communism, Mandela too, for that matter. Not just communism and socialism, but also liberalism, democracy, the Declaration of Independence, the liberty, equality, fraternity of the French Revolution. These people imbibed, absorbed, and repeated these assertions when saying, "You believe in this for your people, but not for our people because we have a different skin color and a different racial background. You must be consistent and apply it to us." So they used Western principles to advocate for their independence from the West, but it was their connection, the colonization of their lands by the West that allowed them to learn the Western principles in the first place. So in a way, they bit the hand that fed them, but also they called the Europeans to be morally, socially, and politically consistent with their principles of freedom and equality. So, um, colonization sucks, but it's not that simple. There's more to it. Yeah, I do my shorts are I have them every day. My last long form video is my reading about what was it, Patrick Henry's speech? When does politics become history? Were World War I and World War II not political wars? When does it not become okay to talk about history ignoring the events about political? Past historical events are political, but they're not necessarily controversial. So controversial politics and geopolitics of today, I want a donation for, or I'm not going to discuss it. And I'm not even going to say this is what I think should be done. I'm going to give a historical perspective. Talk about Cuba. What do you want to know about it? And within a few years was facing famine. Yes, that's true. Okay. Zimbabwe is the perfect example. Well, that's Mugabe. That's the communists. That's the kleptocracy where everyone steals from the poor people. That's a pretty extreme example. Okay. Do we have any other questions? We're over halfway through. Am I coming in clear? Coloniza- uh, colonization was a defense move in response to hundreds of years of enslaving Euro coastlines. No, it wasn't. It was acquisitive. To be fair, the second part did indeed happen, but they are not the same. What's the root of American colonialism? You could argue that manifest destiny and westward expansion in the 19th century were a form of American colonialism. I would argue that it really starts in the late 19th century when the Americans try to emulate the Europeans, and you obviously have the Spanish American War being the best example of the Americans grabbing land from the Spanish Empire, like Cuba, Puerto Rico, and the Philippines. What ideas did we put in the water that the Spanish American War, we pretty much created the country? Yeah, okay. Why is everybody focused on past slavery when it's happening today under a different name, human trafficking? That's true. But we should learn the lessons of the past to realize that people really don't pay enough attention to the moral evils of today, and they did pay enough moral attention to the moral evils of yesteryear. Couldn't you count the Oregon Trail as West? Yes, you could. I don't really see it as colonizing. I see it more as conquest of land that is right next to you. When I think of colonizing, I think of developing areas of land in overseas regions, usually interglobal, intercontinental. What ideas did we put into their government after the Spanish American War? Like we formed their government. It's like the turn of the century from 1800s to 1900s. The Americans basically the Cubans became heavily dependent on the American economy and on American political relations as America became a political ally. Um, well, the Trail of Tears isn't that. So, um, imperialism allows a place to have its own culture over time, but it leaves behind hopeful ideas, knowledge, systems, and connections. It's true, and that knowledge and connections and systems actually undermined the very imperial apparatus that the British and French have built in Africa and Asia, and led to their decolonization efforts. That's why Ho Chi Minh and Mandela and Gandhi were quoting the founding fathers and other leaders in the West. Hawaii and Alaska, Alaska's on the continent. America bought Alaska. It really didn't colonize Alaska. Hawaii is a form of colonization, and it was happening at the same time as the colonization in Asia, in the Philippines and Guam. The Trail of Tears isn't bad. Isn't that a funny thing to be able to say? It is bad. About a third of the Cherokee dying because they were forced out of our land because the U.S. government wasn't consistent and President Andrew Jackson ignored the Supreme Court. It was pretty terrible. It's kind of Polynesian, yeah. Do you think fascism is rising in the recent years? Yes. Stop asking that question. I'm tired of being asked if fascism is rising. Yes, fascism is rising. Also, people being ignorant about what fascism is rising. I mean, I once went to a protest. I actually stumbled onto a protest. It was a Tesla protest. This was 2025. When people protesting Doge and Elon Musk. And I talked to some of the people who were in the protest, and none of them know what fascism is. None of them. Well, I was crossing the street. I tell the story all the time, and there was a guy, and he has a sign that says "Stop Fascism." He's a guy in his 60s. He's significantly older than I am. He should know enough about America's history and have lived through it to know what fascism is. And I say to him, "What is that's a nice sign you got there." And he's like, "Oh yeah, thank you." And he's like, "Oh yeah, I've got a fellow traveler here in my ignorant ideas." And I'm like, and it's not that the political arguments are ignorant. It's that when you just people who just claim this is fascism or this is communism, which is what the right does a lot, they don't know what it is. Um, and he says to me, I say, okay, what's a fascist? And he says, uh, uh, do you know what a Nazi is? And I'm like, no. Okay, so he clearly doesn't know anything about logic, but he's also clearly stupid. This man's in his 60s. He should be ashamed of himself. And I said, no, what's a Nazi? And he says, probably you. Because I asked questions he couldn't answer. I'm a Nazi. And then he just went across the street. He knew that I knew what a fascist and a Nazi were. I was just showing him how ignorant he was. I get across the street and there's a couple people there and they're like, "Did he just call you a Nazi?" I'm like, "Yep." And they're like, "Are you a Nazi?" And I'm like, "I'm a historian. I know what Nazism is. I know what fascism is. He doesn't know what it is. And if we lived in a fascist state and Trump was a fascist, these people wouldn't be on the street protesting. Not for long. There'd be a bunch of orange shirts because they would wear orange in honor of their leader who would be there to round them up and arrest them. Nobody knows what fascism is because nobody actually studies it. Fascism is an Italian spin-off of socialism that prioritizes not just the totalitarian command economy of classical Marxism, it melds it together with nationalist principles and the cultural apparatuses of the right to basically synthesize the extreme right and the extreme left, extreme traditional values and extreme cultural icons with command economy and authoritarian government and everything else you saw in the Soviet Union. And Mussolini did not invent it, but he was the first one to bring it into power. So that's what fascism is. It is based on the Italian. It is a militaristic, anti-democratic, illiberal, anti-capitalist form of government that basically believes in extreme nationalism, and everything the state does should be only exclusively for the nation itself. So fascism, there you go. And it's based off of a fasce, which is a bundle of sticks, which when tied together is stronger together. The idea that the nation is stronger when it is tied together and working communally. Are you saying that we donated money yearly to subsidize Cuba as a country? I know that Cuba was subsidized as a country during its communist regime until the fall of the USSR. Yes, it was. Who was subsidizing you? Was it the Americans or the commies? Uh, why do we, I don't think we need moon bases, but that's not my periphery. I know America did invest sugar plantations, but I thought it was individuals, not. Yeah, businesses. America does this through private businesses and consumers and social opportunities all the time. It's not just the government. But the Cubans were an ally of the United States for a long time, and part of the sphere of influence in America of the United States and Latin America up until the rise of the Castros. Um, and Americans are obnoxious to everybody because they're obnoxious to each other. That's true. Fascism is the political ideology invented by Mussolini and then put into final form by Hitler and the Nazi Party. No, what true, but there's more to it. There's a lot more to it. Franco-fascism in Spain is a kind of diet fascism replacing a monarchy. Might be wrong. That is actually an excellent description of it, uh, Flaminello, because the way that fascism works in Spain is Franco basically pulls the strings as he can be as extreme as he wants to be, and he can let up whenever he wants to. And that's how the fascist government of Spain kept from collapsing over and over again because Franco was willing to be a little bit more permissive from time to time, similar to the communists in the Soviet Union doing the new economic policy to stay in power after the Russian Civil War in the 1920s. Um, Franco stayed in power until his death. So yeah, Franco is kind of a diet fascism, and he's allowed to stay in power, which Mussolini would have been had he not sided with Hitler, because he basically said, "Yeah, I like the fascists, but I don't like Nazism. I'm not going to kill Jews, and by the way, I'm not a communist." That's why the U.S. kept him in power. How would you describe today's MAGA? Make America Great Again was not invented by Donald Trump. It has been a right-wing concept for decades. Richard Nixon, Ronald Reagan used these terms when they ran for president. It's the only idea is that America needs to be great again, according to the definition of our political party. Both political parties do this all the time. They just don't say it outright. And now it's turned into a movement that is embodied by Trump's nativism and isolationism, but has now gone to mean more than just that. It means it's a movement that is even beyond him. In many ways, MAGA has been outrun on the right, especially the far right, by the America First movement, which is basically just this on steroids, nationalism on steroids. And many of them are at least advocates or apologists for actual fascism. Not MAGA itself, but the America First people. What is the third way in reference to Russia? Well, that was Gorbachev's way of moderating socialism and communism through glasnost and perestroika in order to save the Soviet Union, which immediately gave political freedom to people. And people were like, we don't want to be communists anymore. And Gorbachev was horrified that they would do that to him. Um, Unlike France that keeps failing after creating new constitutions. The new one's holding up for now. The Nazi Party is called National Socialist Party, but it wasn't social at all, was it? The term socialist in the name is very confusing. Socialist only means that everybody in the society socializes, works together communally to run the economy and the society. It is the idea that everyone is basically all in this together. Up until the 1920s, it was synonymous with communism. Different forms of socialism arose that were different, such as utopian socialism and Fabian socialism, but they are basically desiring the same things that Marx desired in the Communist Manifesto. I'm going to fix the stupid lighting issue. Okay. All right. Other questions about history and social studies? Well, democratic socialism is not, social democracy is not necessarily socialism. That's a welfare state. What is your newest history era that we aren't talking about that we should? I think every historical era isn't talked about enough. I'm not going to go into details about which one should we talk about more or less. Did Stalin in title the Jews as a protected class? No. In fact, Stalin was ready to do his own nonsense to the Jews before he died in the 1950s. What era of history have you been really interested in recently? Um, oh boy, I look at all types of history because I learn about history every day. Do daily shorts. I do born today, die today, uh, today in history, stuff like that. So I'm looking at all different types of history because all different types of historical things happen all the time. Um, really looking at Asian history recently for my live stream lecture from last week about communism in Asia. I learned about Southeast Asia, stuff I didn't know before about Cambodia and Laos. And the Pathat Lao is one of the most fun things to say, not just the Communist Party in Laos. What would you say is the most underrated era of history? Underrated era? I don't know. I'd say the Napoleonic Wars doesn't get the love that it deserves. Do you know much about the great locomotive chase that involved the general? Not huge. We're glad to have you. Instant. Please like and subscribe on your way out if you haven't already. Other questions about history and social studies? 85 AD, the Roman being attacked by the German and Celts, destroying two legions. I just found a bit about it today, and that makes it me rather be Greek than Roman. Well, it was called Greco-Roman for a reason. Anyways, we got about 15 minutes left. Whatever questions do we have about history and social sciences? I have next to me a Spanish Astra pistol brought to me by 1981. Spanish police and army arms flooded USA after Franco passed. Any guess why? Uh, they probably wanted to get out of a collapsing society because that's what Spain was in the 1970s. I mean, you have a this powerful political figure who's all of a sudden dead, and you need to justify your society. So you need to fix your society. You need your society to continue to run smoothly, and it's a you all of a sudden have a power vacuum and a collapse, and that can be extraordinarily dangerous. Yep, and that sounds like Americans doing that with gun crime. Give me a second, guys. I will be right. Okay, we are back. I finally got the lighting hopefully fixed. Nope, that's not it. So let me see here. Okay, we are back. That's probably the best I'm gonna be able to do. I finally have a way to plug in all of my lighting in the right spot. So I've been working on adjusting that, as you can tell, and I think I finally got it. So, anyways, um, let me see. Let me change my background while I'm doing this. Okay, this is the Friendly Neighborhood History channel where we do history in a friendly neighborly manner 24/7, 365 or 366 days a year. We've got a nice Civil War painting in the background for all of you. So please, what do we want to talk about regarding history and social studies? I'll go for about another 10 minutes or so. Faraz is here. It's good to have him here. I forget what the last thing someone said was. I think I've answered everything. Is it true that the 19th century issues indicated that France actually had a far more anti-Semitic tradition than Germany? Dreyfus Affair. Yeah, France and Germany are pretty equivalent. I mean, I think the Nazis changed that equation, but they're pretty equivalent in terms of anti-Semitism throughout their history in the medieval and modern world. I mean, it can be. If you want to learn anything about history, social studies from any part of the world, any era, then you're in the right place, Yo Wang. I think Civil War was not a nice thing that happened. Yes, it was pretty bad. Um, I'm not doing a debate tomorrow. You can debate Harry about the War of 1812, but I'm not debating this with you. Um, do you believe Russia is entitled to a warm water seaport? Yeah, no, I don't know. Who's entitled to anything? I don't make the rules. Other questions. Um, but let me turn this off. There we are. Mm. Other questions about history? Yeah, like Confederate flag. Well, I use it as a background talking about a historical issue. I should be fine. Yeah, I don't wanna debate, the effects of a war. I don't find that productive. Not interested in that. I've already said that. Um, Other questions about actual history instead of people's vendettas about debates. Why are the Jews at fault for everything? Because people are stupid. Go and watch my live stream lecture from 2 weeks ago. Don't make me tap the sign like the Simpsons bus driver. But James Polk debate. Well, I have to read what you actually think and find out why it's wrong to debate it. What question did you ask for us? Do you think suspending habeas corpus during the Civil War was a correct move and should it be applied now? I think it makes sense in the context. I don't think it's the right move by Lincoln, but I understand why he did it. Can you talk a little bit about the history behind the conflict between Taiwan and China? The United States has supported Taiwan ever since Chiang Kai shek and the Chinese forces fled there in 1949. It is a bastion against communism. The communist Chinese instantly became an ally of the Soviet Union. They have done many things to abuse and thwart human rights, and the United States supposedly, ostensibly cares about that, so that's why. Thoughts on Andrew Jackson as a president? Effective president, terrible human being, worked in the context of when he lived, wouldn't have worked as president today. That's Andrew Jackson in a nutshell. The Sino-Soviet split is the reason why worldwide communism will never work. Yeah, that's true too. You know how every empire connects itself to an older empire, like how Russia believe they are actually the third Rome. Why didn't British Empire did that? In some ways, the British did see themselves as a continuation of the Romans. I think every European empire, in one way or another, saw that, but the British knew what they were doing was unique. Even the North Viet Cong split from the Chinese. True. Reagan is the reason things went bad. One of them. Okay. Any other questions about history or social studies? We started early today. So if you're just joining us, we did start early instead of late. As usually we start late. We're starting early today. We had about a 2 or 3 minute delay there while I fixed the lighting issue. But yeah. How Orientalism was different in East Asia and West Asia, Middle East. I've already explained this. I'm not going to explain it again for us. I'm tired of talking about this. The thing I have said before is that East Asia is seen as more elusive, more secretive than the Middle East, which is an enemy because of religious reasons. The Far East has much more economic and social capital. in the minds of the Europeans in the last couple of centuries than the Middle East did, especially considering the fact that it became less about religious conflict and more about economic and social conflict. Yeah, troops on the way to Iran. We'll see what happens. I don't really want to talk about it. What do people mean when they refer to the Deep South versus the rest of the South? Difference. Deep South is places like Alabama, Mississippi, Georgia, North Carolina, Virginia, and Tennessee aren't considered the Deep South. There's 7 states that leave and join the Confederacy right away in 1861, and there are 4 more that join later. That's another distinction. If America was a person, you think it would be male or female? Definitely male. I like this channel. I want it to be more popular, but I think you should do more long form videos with better SEO and thumbnails. Just a suggestion. Thanks. What's SEO stand for again? Thank you for your suggestion. Go watch all my long form videos before you comment again. America's robust, it's aggressive, and it fights a lot of wars. That's a man. Most people cannot quite quote William Shakespeare concerning 40 acres and a mule or reparations. That's because William Sherman. Oh yeah, that was the promise given supposedly to freed slaves that they would get 40. Search engine optimization. I don't even know how to do that. So you'd have to explain that to me. Are you talking about like giving a description? Is that it? The colonists wanted to fully abolish slavery, but King George III enforced the slave trade, which is a big factor in the American Revolution. Yes, that's true. Not fully true, but partially true. Can you talk about the moon landing as a historical event? You think it's a legacy still alive? Yes, it's a historical event. Apollo 11 landed on the moon in the middle of July 1969, fulfilling a promise by President Kennedy that the Americans would reach the moon within a decade. It's a huge accomplishment for Nixon's presidency. It's a huge accomplishment in the space race. It's a huge W for the U.S. when it comes to the Cold War, which is the whole reason the space race had started 12 years earlier when Sputnik was sent into the air by the Soviets. Um, it's I forget the Michael Collins is the pilot, along with Buzz Aldrin and Neil Armstrong, and Armstrong is the first man to walk on the moon, famously saying, "One small step for man, one large step for mankind." Mm, and his legacy is still alive, or else there wouldn't be a bunch of idiots on the internet trying to disprove it actually happened. Um, no U.S. state had abolished slavery or passed resolutions in their colonial assemblies. To my knowledge, they wanted to abolish slavery. By the 1780s, they had a lot of them did want to abolish slavery, but it was an ongoing debate in the North by the time of the 1780s. It obviously wasn't present in the South. The British There was a line about getting about the king enforcing slavery and allowing slavery, and Franklin made Jefferson get rid of it, which is ironic because Franklin started an abolitionist society in Pennsylvania, and Jefferson was a slave owner. So kind of ironic how that worked out. Yeah. Okay. I guess I can change that. Thank you. But why don't you go watch the rest of the videos? Um, the US hasn't been interested in that since they won the space race and have rested on their laurels ever since then when it comes to NASA and space travel. Although Viking and Apollo 13, there have been some pretty incredible missions that the US has done when it comes to space travel. All right, I will get right to work on the SEO stuff. Um, Even in the 1600s, the meeting of the Friends required abolitionism for colonies. No, it didn't. Abolitionism was on the table. Getting rid of slavery was on the table. It wasn't a widespread idea that had gained a lot of traction in the U.S. colonies and states. And the first abolitionist movements, yes, that's true. I'm talking about Jefferson owning slaves, yet saying slavery should stop, and Franklin not owning slaves, or did own slaves briefly, but really didn't own it by the time he wrote the Declaration of Independence, starting the Abolitionist Society of Pennsylvania, and then basically saying, "Yeah, I'm not doing. Don't abolish slavery because then the southern states won't declare independence from the British." I don't really. I would love to have an intro to my videos and lives. I do not need one. Um, One of the central unspoken reasons why the American colonies wanted independence was westward expansion at the cost of the Native Americans. That's true. The British allowed the Native Americans to live in the West, which is now the Midwest of the United States, and the American colonies wanted to move into that area and violate the land of the natives. Um, no, the British started before the Americans with abolitionism, 393. But the Americans are definitely one of the cool leaders in global abolition, both during and after the Civil War. Um, Anyways, I'm over an hour. I'm gonna wrap up. Thank you all for joining, and everything and bearing with the me fixing the lighting issue, but now it should be fixed. So, um, What else? We will be back tomorrow at 3 p.m. Eastern for more Q&A, so more friendly neighborhood history. Sorry, Reptilian. I'm glad you made it, but we're just wrapping up right now. Um, we abolished it 32 years before you did. However, were we late? Except for the fact that the British gave the Americans their slaves, gave the Americans the institution of slavery, and have been enslaving people for far longer than the Americans had. So you were late. By that standard, you were late. You didn't fight a civil war, which killed hundreds of thousands of people, so you got that moral side. But no, slavery had been in Britain long before 1776 and long before 1789 in the Constitution. Nope, never mind. Proportionally, the Americans abolished slavery way sooner than the French or the British. Thank you. Yeah, your questions were fine, I guess. I don't know. Ask whatever you want. I'm not saying I'm going to answer it or not ask for a super chat. Um, so, all right. I'm going to wrap up. Thank you for joining us. I will be back tomorrow at 3 p.m. Eastern to answer all of your questions about history and social studies in a friendly, neighborly manner as best as I can. Hopefully, you enjoyed today's live stream. Please like and subscribe on your way out. Check out the long form and short form content I have available, and we will work on thumbnails and SEO. Thank you that for pointing that out. Have a great rest of your evening. Enjoy. Thank you for spending the first part of your weekend with us, and continue that on tomorrow with our Q&A, and then Sunday with our live stream lecture at 5 p.m. Eastern on a topic you can vote on exclusively here on uh, uh, YouTube. Yes, I did see the Spider-Man trailer, or I haven't seen it, but I do want to go see it. So, all right, guys, take care. Have a great rest of your day, and as always, love history. Bye.